Every year, hundreds of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, are reported over the British Isles. Most of them can be explained, but about 1 in 10 defy the investigators. Witnesses make astonishing claims of their close encounters, of bizarre lights darting around the sky, communication with other forms of intelligence, even of being abducted by aliens. But none is more remarkable than the story we're going to tell tonight. It resulted in inquiries on both sides of the Atlantic and questions in Parliament. It involves senior American Air Force personnel and a former chief of staff at the Ministry of Defense. The witnesses and the evidence they gathered are impossible to ignore. This is the first time all those directly involved have told their story, and we've reconstructed what they described. American airmen stationed in Britain tell of events that would change their lives.
I came to Britain from a tour in the Pentagon, having previously served in the Far East and, of course, in Vietnam like many other people. And I kind of expected it to be somewhat of a quiet tour.
I was at the height of the Cold War, but we weren't directly involved like the bases in Europe.
It was very laid back, not much happened, and you never expected much to happen, especially at Christmas time.
Bentwaters and Woodbridge, twin military air bases in East Anglia. The 3 miles that divide them are filled by Rendlesham Forest. Until last year, the bases were occupied by the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing of the United States Air Force. Although a normally uneventful assignment, they formed a strategic part of Western Europe's defenses. As such, they had top security status. Nothing could get in or out without being detected. An RAF radar station nearby. During the monitoring of a night flying exercise, a strange object was picked up.
We didn't have the faintest idea what it was. We checked through the air traffic agencies. There should have been nothing in that area at the time.
Yeah, Colin, have a look at this. It's just completely static. It's just hovering there.
The only thing we could do was send a jet aircraft in to find out what it was.
Bravo 60, Bravo 60, we have unidentified traffic in your area. Your new target is 270 degrees, range 10 miles, indicating 5,000 feet, over.
They got to within about a quarter of a mile, and the pilots suddenly started reporting that they could see a very bright light in the sky in front of them.
It's extremely bright lights. It's moving away, target accelerating away.
Look at that thing go. Bravo 60, target is still in front of you. It's going straight up. Target going straight up, over.
It was stationary on the screen, and then, in seconds, it moved off at a fantastic rate of speed. Within a space of 5 minutes, it was reaching 90,000 feet and higher, and we lost it off the top end of the radar scope.
Target's accelerating too fast. We can't keep up with it. We're disengaging.
The radar operators were mystified.
There's nothing we have in this day that can perform those kind of manoeuvres. The pilots wouldn't be able to take it. You tell me what it was.
Back on Woodbridge Base, near the East Gate, Airman John Burrows was on security patrol with a colleague.
Stop the car. Look at that. Do you see that in the woods?
There were strange lights out in the forest. To me, it almost looked like Christmas lights at first, a Christmas display.
I'll open the gate.
At that point, we looked at each other and we decided that we better go out and take a closer look because we weren't sure what we were dealing with. What we were looking at wasn't real.
Those are no Christmas lights. Come on, let's get out of here.
Airman Burrows and his colleague raced back to the gatehouse, where he contacted the security controller.
Hi, this is Burrows here. I'm out at the East Gate. We've got a problem here.
He had a lot of trouble believing what I was telling him because it was Christmas and I played a lot of jokes on him before.
I'm serious. This is not a joke. There's something out there.
Eventually persuaded by the airman's tone, the controller contacted Sergeant Jim Peniston.
Roger, Control. We're on our way, over.
I received a call from the control center to go on down to the East Gate and contact John Burroughs. And I asked him what was the nature of the problem down there. And they said that they'd rather not tell me. They'd rather have me go down there and talk to the patrolman on scene.
What is that?
I don't know, and I don't want to know.
Did you hear an explosion, John?
It didn't crash. It landed.
The first thing that came to mind is an aircraft crash. I've had at least 30 or 40 crashes that I have been to at that point in time, and that's definitely what I thought it was.
I'm going to contact control. Sergeant Peniston at the East Gate. I've got a possible aircraft down just beyond the perimeter.
They notified me that they were tracking an unidentified bogey about 15 minutes ago, and they confirmed it with contact with Eastern Radar and Heathrow in London. And at the approximate location about 5 miles off base when they lost contact with it.
Well, they registered it. They don't know what it is either.
So, a plane or what?
It was Christmas time and there was no scheduled flying for that night.
I'd heard rumors that it possibly could have been a British exercise with ships and planes out at sea.
Whatever it was, Sergeant Peniston knew they had to go and find out.
I got permission to proceed off base to investigate.
Following military rules, the Americans had to leave their weapons behind.
One part of me wanted to go ahead and go out there and figure out what we were dealing with, and the other part of me was saying, no, you don't need to go out there, just go ahead, stay back at the gate where it's safe and you don't have to worry about what's going on.
The men went through the forest towards the lights.
This is as far as we go. It's out on foot now.
I started to see a defined shape, and at that point is when I realized it wasn't an aircraft crash, a fire, or anything of that sort. The air was filled with electricity that you could feel it on your skin as we approached the object.
You felt like you were moving in slow motion. Your hair on the back of your head was standing up. You felt like you had very little control over your body.
Then they saw it.
I wish I had my weapon because I felt totally defenseless.
It was about the size of a tank. It was triangular in shape. Underneath the craft was a high-intensity white light emanating out of it, and it was bordered by red and blue lighting, alternating.
When nothing happened, the men, deciding the object wasn't hostile, got up to take a closer look.
On the upper left side of the craft was an inscription that measured 6 inches high of symbols. They looked familiar, but I couldn't ascertain why.
The Americans watched for about 20 minutes.
And slowly started moving back, weaving in and around the trees. Got about 40 feet away, then it raised up into the air, and it shot off as fast as you could blink.
On their return to the airbase, the men were called in by the officer in charge.
Well, what happened out there last night? We know radar saw something. Now I want you to tell me in your words exactly what you saw.
Well, sir, Burroughs was the first to see.
As we were standing there reporting in, then it hit me, and I realized, what in the world am I doing here, standing in front of my lieutenant, getting ready to explain this situation that I just observed. I thought, there goes the career, Jim.
Had markings on it.
Okay, this is what I want you to do.
Gentlemen, he says, I need you to go over to the woods, he says, and take a look at the area in daylight to see if you can find any more physical evidence.
Anything.
We found branches on the ground. We found indentations in the ground.
The local Suffolk police went out too. An officer found the indentations but reported they'd been caused by animals burrowing.
I asked him why, and he says because he's not going to put anything other than that in his report. We found that just totally absurd. The ground was frozen, and it was just impossible for that to happen.
Then the airmen remembered that the object they'd seen was triangular. They measured the distance between the indentations and discovered that they formed a perfect triangle. The activities soon came to the attention of the Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt.
Well, it's the aliens I feel sorry for. I wouldn't want a close encounter of any kind with Burroughs.
Who's been having close encounters?
Sir. Well, I guess you could say we were having a few Christmas festivities.
Oh, yeah?
Well, Burroughs and Peniston said they were out chasing a UFO in the forest.
Are you serious?
Well, that's what they said.
Has anybody confirmed it wasn't an aircraft?
Not that I know of.
Whatever they saw, I want it in the log.
Okay.
I personally knew the individuals that had reported it, and I knew they were very credible people. I was sure something had happened. There was obviously something. I certainly wasn't convinced it was a UFO, but I didn't know what it was.
There was only one way to find out. Huge portable floodlights, known as light-alls, were rigged in the forest, ready for anything which might appear the next night. But as darkness fell, the light-alls began to malfunction. Lieutenant Colonel Holt was interrupted at a Christmas dinner.
The duty flight lieutenant came in, and he was quite shaken and insisted upon speaking myself and the base commander about a matter of utmost urgency. He said, "It's back." And I said, "What's back?" And he said, "The UFO is back." I assembled a small team of experts, and we set off in the forest really to debunk it.
About 30 men followed the lights into the forest, armed with special equipment, including a night vision scope, Geiger counter, and a tape recorder.
Right, this way.
I'm certainly glad we made the tape, because if we hadn't made the tape, even I would have trouble believing what happened that night.
But would anyone else believe them?
Right, this way.
It appears that he may be moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been. Yellow. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
I knew there was something there. There had to be something there. But I also was firmly convinced there was a logical explanation for what was going on.
Portable floodlights, known as light-alls, positioned in the forest, mysteriously refused to work.
It's very unusual to have a problem with a light-all. That night, the light-alls wouldn't work, even when they swapped out and got other ones from the base. In addition, we had problems with our radios. All three frequencies we were using were intermittent and did not work properly that night.
But other equipment was working. A night vision scope, a Geiger counter, and a tape recorder. The sound in this reconstruction is taken from the actual tape they claim to have recorded that night.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. And it's yellow. I saw a yellow tinge in it, too. Weird. It appears that he may be moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been. Yellow. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
It pulsated as though it were an eye winking at you. And around the edges, it appeared to have molten metal dripping off it, just like falling to the ground. But I didn't see any evidence of anything on the ground. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. Here I am, a senior official that routinely denies this sort of thing and diligently works to debunk them, and I'm involved in the middle of something that I can't explain.
The Geiger counter was measuring levels 25 times normal background radiation.
Just jumped up to 7/10 there. 7/10 right there in the center? Uh-huh. I'm getting very positive readings. You're getting readings on the tree you're taking samples from? Where clicks max. That's the strongest point on the tree? Yes, sir.
The night vision scope showed strange readings too.
We're picking up heat reflection off the trees. Looking directly overhead, one can see an opening in the trees plus some freshly broken pine branches on the ground underneath. Looks like some of them came off about 15 to 20 feet up.
The men stayed in pursuit through the woods for 6 hours.
The object suddenly exploded, a silent explosion, and broke into 3 to 5 white objects and rapidly disappeared.
A mile away, Airman John Burroughs was with the broken-down light-alls.
All of a sudden, out of the distance, a blue light streaked past us. Passing the light-alls, they came on. It passed through the open window on the truck, going off into the distance, and the light-alls went out.
As we moved out of the forest, we noticed 3 objects in the sky. The objects in the sky were moving about, sharp, angular movements, very high speed.
It's as if it's looking for something.
I kept getting on the radio and calling the command post.
Thunder, this is Stopper. Call radar and ask them what they've got 30 degrees above the horizon and 10 miles out.
I wanted to know if they were finding anything on the radar scope. One of the objects in the sky was sending down beams of light, beams of energy. I'm not sure what they were. But at the same time, I could hear on the radio voices talking about the beams coming down on the base.
Then a beam shone straight at them.
At this stage, my skepticism had definitely disappeared. I was really in awe.
Almost as rapidly as it appeared, it went. An extraordinary story. But what could be behind it? Some of what the airmen saw can be explained, astronomers say, by a rare coincidence of events in the sky that night.
One of these was the re-entry of a Russian rocket. This came in and burnt up in the Earth's atmosphere. It was seen by thousands of eyewitnesses all over southeastern England. And the second was a brilliant natural fireball, a piece of interplanetary rock burning up in the atmosphere.
Another astronomer thinks further confusion was caused by a third factor, a lighthouse on the nearby coast.
Although it's 6 miles away, it only looks as though it's a few hundred yards away in between the trees. And as the airmen moved around, the lighthouse beam too would have appeared to move in between the trees and retreated in front of them as they moved forward, which is exactly the way they described it.
That theory was backed up when the tape was played against the flashing of the lighthouse.
Right on this position here, straight ahead in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flashlight there. So, there it is.
Yeah, I see it too.
The two matched. But the Americans were well aware of the lighthouse and say that wasn't what they saw.
A lighthouse doesn't move through the forest. The lighthouse doesn't go up and down, it doesn't explode, doesn't change shape, size, doesn't send down beams of light from the sky.
The Rendlesham forest encounters became the talk of the airbase. Lieutenant Colonel Holt knew he had to act.
I really didn't know quite how to handle it. I reported it to my superior, and I was quite concerned, to be honest with you, what his reaction would be. But he was very supportive.
He was told to write a memo to the British Ministry of Defence.
Including the undersigned.
I sent a memo, but I never heard. I kept checking and asking, but I never got a response.
Please.
But other airmen say secret investigations were taking place.
After the incident happened, there seemed to be some strange activity going on in the base. I'm really not sure what it was, but it wasn't normal activity.
At that time, we noticed that there was many unscheduled flights coming in. They told me that I was supposed to keep it quiet and not to take the issue any farther.
According to a former U.S. military intelligence officer, the flights were ordered by his colleagues.
There's a total blackout of any information leaving the base. Even the senior officials on the base were not told about these flights coming in and leaving. These flights contain teams of specialists. They were to gather specific data in their fields of expertise. All of that information then was to be sent to Washington, D.C., where it would be assessed and accumulated in a finalized, highly classified report.
Whatever conclusions may have been reached, Lieutenant Colonel Holt wasn't told. He's mystified as to why, as a senior officer, his report never even received a reply.
To this day, I'm very puzzled why nobody ever came back and asked for additional information, asked questions, or even interviewed me. It doesn't really add up.
But news of the sightings began to leak out. Local investigators began to take matters into their own hands.
We asked the local people if they'd heard anything and seen anything, and most of the local people said that they'd seen the lights over the forest.
A few days later, though, they seemed less forthcoming.
They'd all been told to keep quiet, and two of the local people who lived near the airbase told us originally what they'd seen from their bedroom window, and then when we went back they'd got MOD property private keep out, and they'd got barriers around the house.
The local investigators managed to get a copy from the US government of the Deputy Commander's memo. In Britain, it prompted a question in Parliament.
I have seen the memorandum to which my honourable friend refers. I am ready to give information about any such reported sightings that are found to be a matter of concern from a defence standpoint, but there have been none to date.
The case intrigued Lord Hill Norton, a former Chief of Staff at the Ministry of Defence.
One can't help feeling that something is being concealed. Either the Americans and indeed the Deputy Base Commander were hallucinating, or they believed that something had landed there and they had taken photographs and records of it. And in either event, it must be of interest to the defence of the United Kingdom.
Sergeant Jim Peniston is not only convinced by what he saw then, a cover-up could explain what he says happened after he left the US Air Force.
As time went by, a year or two, I had noticed that my mail was being tampered with, opened and resealed, and we also got to the one point where we found a listening device within my home.
Soon after the stories surrounding the Suffolk Air Bases surfaced, a large swathe of Rendlesham Forest was cut down. Locals believe because of the radiation left behind.
When we asked why the trees were cleared so quickly, we were told because of the traces that were left on them. And we tried to find out who'd taken the trees away. No, we were told that they were just taken.
The air bases have gone too. With the end of the Cold War, the Americans left. But the mystery won't go away.
The ministry have doggedly denied that anything untoward occurred there, and I simply don't believe it. Therefore, somebody, I don't know who it is sitting on information which by now should be public.
If a secret report is in Washington, what could it contain? The former intelligence officer claims he knows.
That finalized report concluded that real objects were seen, that these objects were a result of a highly evolved, advanced technology. The technology was so advanced that we cannot to this day replicate it. That there was an intelligence involved, and that intelligence did not originate on Earth.
And according to the radar operator who first saw an object, it's far from being the only UFO incident.
These things are being picked up by radar operators throughout the whole world, not just in Britain. And we're not told what they are, and we're not expected to ask questions about what they are.
The Ministry of Defense admits they have more than 8,000 cases of UFOs on file. As for Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, although he never heard any more about his UFO report, it didn't, as he'd feared, damage his career. Soon afterwards, he was promoted from deputy commander to commander of the airbase. Rather strange, you might think, if he'd been suspected of not telling the truth. We're going undercover now, but see you again soon. Good night.